Andrew, hi. Welcome to your first virtual
Hi.
Speakers for Schools talk. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Welcome. Look, it's a great. Sorry.
Apologies.
No, it's a great pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity. And I'm really impressed by how you told me how many people you were expecting to be online, and it's incredibly impressive. So I'm really impressed. So I said I'd say a little bit at the beginning about the Bank of England, and then we can go straight into the questions and answers. So it's. Of course, it's a very strange time for all of us. It's a strange time for me. I'm sitting in the Bank of England this afternoon. I always have to say this because when people look at the scene behind me, it's not my house, let's be clear. And I'm sitting in an almost empty Bank of England, which is just pretty weird because the bank's a very big building. We have about 3,500 staff or so, 4,000 staff. They're not all in this building when they're here, but quite a lot are. So sitting in this building with only about 80 staff here today is just pretty weird. And it's been like that for my whole time as governor so far. This is my 18th week as governor. I joined the bank actually in 1985, I should say, so it's 35 years since I joined the bank. I was out for a few years before becoming governor. But so my first week was the week before the lockdown began, and half the staff were here. And I didn't take it personally that the other half had gone away. And by the end of the week, they'd all gone. And since then, it's been, as I say, just so strange. But we're operating very well. We're doing everything, via video and on the phone, pretty much. And so I said I'd start about talking a bit about what the bank does. So I'm going to start the other way around and tell you I've been incredibly impressed by the bank staff and how much they can do without actually being here. But there's two things that we just can't do from home. So we can't tell somebody to take the stock of banknotes home and issue them from their house. So we do have staff issuing banknotes. And we can't ask somebody to take the stock of gold home and keep that at home either. It's just a bit big. But those are the things that we have to do from here. And the bank does issue banknotes. And I used to be the chief cashier, so you may still have a £20 note with my signature on it. But let me say a bit about what we do, other things we do. So we are here to what we call operate monetary policy, which is about the stability of the economy. It's about keeping inflation stable and under control and hitting our inflation target of 2%. And with that goes a more stable economy. Now, of course, in the current environment, this is, more interesting and important than ever because, again, I could not have predicted that when I started my term as governor, the economy would, in large parts of it, shut down. And we're looking at a decline of activity in the economy in the second quarter of this year. So that's April, May, and June of probably around about 20% of the whole economy relative to the end of last year. That is unprecedented. I mean, we think it may have happened 300 years ago in 1 year when there was a war, there was a plague, and there was a very bad winter. But, it's absolutely unprecedented. So what have I done to deserve this? And so it's presented us with, very unusual challenges. In my first week, we also faced some very severe disruption in financial markets, which we had to deal with. And we had to act very aggressively and very substantially, as indeed my predecessor, Mark Carney, had to do in his last week as governor. And to give you a sense, I mean, we've cut interest rates almost to zero. So they're now at 0.1%. And since I became governor, we've bought £200 billion of assets to, again, provide further support to the economy by putting liquidity into the economy. And £200 billion, we do tend to deal in large numbers at the Bank of England, but that is the biggest the bank's ever done. It's the fastest we've ever done. We were buying government debt at the rate of about £14 billion a week at one point, throughout most of my term, actually. We're sort of bringing it off now a bit. But I mean, this is just a hugely unprecedented downturn in the economy. Now, let me give you some more encouraging news. We are seeing the economy coming back now somewhat because obviously we're all, the restrictions are beginning to be lifted. And as they are, we're all starting to do a bit more and do things, and that's bringing some activity back. But there's a long way to go. We're very worried about jobs. As are a lot of people, about how this will impact jobs. We think that it's quite likely that more activity will return, but more jobs will not return necessarily immediately. This close down has hit those parts of the economy that are heaviest in terms of employment, because obviously the restrictions are really designed to what people, as all of us as individuals, can do. So it's not surprising in a sense that it has more impact on shops, hospitality, entertainment, all the things that employ a lot of people. And I should say, this is really important, all the things that actually employ a lot of lower paid people as well. And that's really important in terms of the economy and people's well-being, because we're here to support the economy, but we're ultimately here to support the well-being of the people of this country. That's our job, and it's actually our duty, as I always say. So that's a big part of what we do. Second big part of what we do is what we call the stability of the financial system, particularly the banking system, but other parts of it as well. We do a lot of work to try and keep the financial system stable. We had a very bad crisis 10, 12 years ago, which I was also heavily involved in. Fortunately, so far, as I would say, the banks have not, they've actually been here to support the economy, not having the economy support the banks, which is good. But again, it's something that we keep constantly vigilant about as to the stability of the financial system. And of course, that's important not just in its own right, but because if it goes wrong, it affects the economy, and it affects well-being more generally. So we do that as well. And then, as I was saying earlier, we do a lot of banking and payments. A lot of the payments everybody makes, particularly the big value payments, go through the Bank of England. We still issue banknotes. People are talking today about cash being used a lot less, and I think it is being used a lot less. But you wouldn't believe it. The amount of cash actually we issue is still going up. So it's a bit of an interesting difference. It depends which way you look at it with cash. But there's no doubt that we're all using banknotes probably less in terms of what we pay for. We're using other forms of payment more. We're actually quite heavily involved in regulating and operating other forms of payment. We operate a system which all of it sort of eventually settles at the Bank of England, though we don't operate a lot of the individual systems. So payments is another big part of our activity. So I might stop there, because otherwise I'll go on for the whole 40 minutes, which you don't want, and let's go over to the questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. We've had quite a lot of questions submitted already, Andrew. I think we had about 50 or 60 in the short time we've been live, which is fantastic. Wow. But I guess quite a few of our students are really interested in your journey as well, actually, and kind of how you got to where you are today. So one of our students here has asked, who or what has inspired you throughout your career?
Well, that's a good question. I've learned from a lot of people during my career. I always say to people, I did not know what I wanted. I don't know whether you may all know exactly what you want to do. Some people do. My son wants to be a film editor. He knows he's at university now. He knew from school what he wanted to do, and I sort of thought, great, but I wasn't like that actually. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So it wasn't until quite late on in my education that I had some view. So I grew up in Leicester, actually, which is obviously a town that's rather sadly in the news a lot at the moment, actually. And then I went on to university. I did a PhD. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And eventually, people asked me, well, how did you decide to go and work at the Bank of England? And I said, well, it just sort of seemed interesting. And so I joined, as I said, I joined the Bank of England in 1985. And I've hung around. And I always say to people, I say two things. One, I'm fascinated by what I call complicated public, difficult public policy issues, and we've certainly got them at the moment. But that's what's. I mean, I've done various things throughout my career in that field, but it is, it's really complicated and really hard at times, and I find it fascinating. I also say I'm lucky. I think I'm very lucky, actually, in many respects, probably. But one of the reasons I'm lucky is I get to do something I enjoy. And what I would say to people, if you can get to do something you enjoy in work, then that really is a gift, actually. And I've learned from a lot of people, both inside the Bank of England and outside, about how to do things. And you still learn, I can tell you. I mean, the last 18 weeks. I'm still having to think, Yeah, well, I've never had to deal with a pandemic before. So, there's a few things from the past I think, well, that could be relevant or that could be useful, but some of it, we're just having to sort of think it through afresh, because it is not something any of us have ever had to deal with. We sort of thought about it a bit at times, but never had to deal with it.
Fantastic, thank you so much. One of our students here, Chris, and it may very well be dealing with a pandemic as the answer to this question, has asked, what is the greatest challenge you faced in your job or during your career?
Well, that's fascinating, because people ask me this question about whether what we're going through now is worse than the global financial crisis of about sort of 12 years ago now, 10, 12 years ago. And it's interesting, they're different. The financial crisis was hard in the sense that it went on for a long time, but of course this may do too, we don't know. We don't know yet. We're only about 3 months in or 4 months in. There were certainly moments during the financial crisis when it felt out of control. So this period has felt very different to me. One of the things that I say to people that's odd about this period, it's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, is that people say to me, you must be very busy. And I say, well, yes, we are very busy. I mean, there's a huge amount going on, but it's just so quiet here. It's weird. Whereas the financial crisis, we were at work some days we were literally at work 24 hours a day. I had a birthday during the financial crisis, and I spent every hour of my birthday in the Bank of England, literally every one of the 24 hours. And it felt just completely different, and it's hard to compare. So I don't know. I'm probably going between the two. I think it's between these two. Unfortunately, and I hope that's it for me. But in terms of global crises, but it's hard to compare. I'm going to reserve judgment on them. But it's between those two. But they are quite different in some ways. Quite different.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Quite a few of our students asking questions about kind of their own future careers as well. And of course, we've got lots of questions about the economy and society, which we will move on to as well. And one of our students here has asked, what are your top tips in order to reach a senior position within banking or within a finance job?
Well, I think first of all, as I said, I think you've got to want to do it. I mean, you've got to want to be interested in the challenge that it brings. I think if it's not your challenge, then work out what is your thing. I mean, broadly, I think banking and finance have changed a lot in my time, and I'm sure they will change again. I mean, and I think the global financial crisis was the sort of, in a sense, the defining moment. I mean, I look back at the industry pre-crisis, it was very different. I have to be honest with you, I don't think, many aspects of it were ones that we'd want to repeat. And I think one of the big lessons from that period was that we have to have a financial services industry that does, serve the public broadly. And I think that is, for the most part, much more embedded. So I give you a very obviously relevant example today. And this is something that Mark Carney, great credit to him, really pioneered, was the role of financial services in contributing to climate change and to countering climate change, towards greening the economy and greening society and green finance. And that's an example of something which I think if you went back in time, I don't think the financial services industry would have really felt it was anything to, its responsibility and it was its sort of duty to take on. I think we live now in a world where I think it is understood that we've all got that responsibility, and we in the Bank of England can do a lot to, in a sense, help to shape it. But it's got to be done more widely. So I think, the good news, if you're looking for a career in finance and so on, is that I think there is a greater sense now of sort of what I might call social responsibility. And I would say to people, I mean, do think about it in those terms that, the industry doesn't always have the best public reputation, it has to be said, and some of the past, contributes to that. But I think there is if we ever wanted to understand how important it is to society, I think both, the issue of climate change and the issue of COVID, what the role it has to play in supporting the economy and supporting people through it, underline how important it is.
That's fantastic, thank you. One of our students here has asked, do you think it's a requirement to be good at maths to have a career in banking or within the Bank of England? And do you think a maths or economics degree would be most helpful?
Well, we recruit actually quite a range of skills. So yes, we've got quite a large, obviously, stock of economists, and we need that because a lot of what we do has economics at its heart, but we are by no means only an institution that is employing economists, and that's because we do, as I said earlier, a range of things, some of which are more explicitly to do with economics, some of which it's useful to have a sort of framework of understanding of economics and how the economy works. And it's important to do that, but it's not the sort of necessarily the core skills. So we're very much, in the business of recruiting across the board. I think your point about maths is interesting. I think if you talk to some of my colleagues, they would say, yes, but what we're also, and I think like a lot of employers going to be looking for, is people who are what I might call comfortable with data and data science. Now, obviously, part of that is to do with maths, but a part of it is to do with other skills. So I think, increasingly, I think our expectation is that our staff are comfortable with that. We're having, like many institutions, to overhaul the way in which we use data. If you think, just give you an example of COVID. We are much more reliant now on high frequency data to understand how the economy is performing. So we're, extracting data from the internet, from payment systems, from wherever we can get it, and then, but not just extracting it, but then seeking to understand, are these data useful and representative? Because obviously you don't want to take something that's misleading. And having those, those core skills, again, not unique. We don't need everybody to do that. But I think increasingly, the Bank of England, like quite a lot of other employers, is saying we need people who can come here and are, comfortable and can, contribute quickly in terms of their ability and comfort with data.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, thank you. And I'm sure it will really help our students who might be thinking about a career in finance or economics or even at the Bank of England. One of our students here has asked, this is from Caitlin, Caitlin wonders, how vital is your job in the bank in terms of keeping society going throughout the pandemic?
Well, I think we've been important, but by no means unique. Let me say, we're not the front line. The NHS has been the front line, and all the emergency services and the people who support the NHS. And I don't want to take away from the hugely important role that they have fulfilled. So we're important, but we've been by no means, I say, the front line. But we are important because we keep, obviously, we keep the financial system working in important ways, and we have a very important role in the economy. And we've had to take some, actually, frankly, unprecedented in terms of scale actions very quickly to fulfil that role. And without it, I think things would have been more difficult. So it's not just us. We work very closely with the Treasury. I work very closely with the Chancellor. Rishi Sunak and I were talking every day during the height of it. So yes, it is important. What the Bank of England does is important, but I don't want to take away from the fact that there are people in society who've contributed a lot more and put themselves at a lot more personal risk and danger than we do. So we are important. We're important, but we're by no means, I wouldn't say we're not the front line in that sense.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. One of our students has asked, As COVID-19 means fewer people will be using cash to make payments, will this have an impact on the economy?
Well, I don't think it'll have an impact on the economy, because I think people can these days quite easily move between means of payment, and so we're all using various forms of electronic payment much more readily. We've got far more facilities to do that. It's much easier. I think things like the no contact, the card schemes, for instance, which have really transformed the way small payments are made in many facilities, shops, and so on, have actually made a huge difference in that respect very quickly. So it doesn't affect the economy. What it does affect is that there are still some people and some groups in society who are very dependent on cash for various reasons. They don't have as much access to the banking system, or they don't find it as easy to use the new facilities. And we're very conscious, along with the other official bodies, that there is still a role for cash. And as long as there is a role for cash, and my best guess is that will go on. I don't envisage us losing cash in that sense. Then it's important that it's there. That there's a section of society that needs it, that uses it, and it's our job to provide it. And we will go on doing that, no question. And we will go on ensuring that it's available, that it's secure, and meets the objectives that we have for cash.
That's fantastic, thank you. And slightly links on to another question that was asked by one of our students, which was, do you think we will ever be in a completely cashless society?
I don't see it in the foreseeable future. One or two other countries actually, interestingly, did sort of somewhat set off down that route and then actually pulled back. And maybe I'd say a number of reasons for that. One is, as I was saying a few minutes ago, there are some sections of society who that really would not work for. Who really are not comfortable or not able to have access in the same way. It is, the other thing to say, although it's very important, and it's another of the roles of the Bank of England to ensure that electronic payment systems are as robust as they can be. Cash is a fallback for all of us in a sense. I suspect most of us actually do have some bit. Maybe because we use it, or maybe because we just feel more comfortable knowing that we've got some of it and we could use it if we found ourselves for whatever reason unable to use the other systems. So I don't see us moving to a cashless society at the moment, but I'm not surprised that we're seeing a big reduction in the everyday use of it as means of electronic payments grow and become more of a...
Wonderful, thank you. One of our students here has asked, they're very future focused, our audience today, has asked, do you think cryptocurrencies will replace money as we know it in the future?
Digital currencies.
Cryptocurrencies.
That's a very big Bank of England question at the moment. Yes, if you want to come work at the Bank of England, come and work on digital currencies and what they might be. So one of the big questions is exactly what is going to be a digital currency. So we spend a lot of time on this. So it's not Bitcoin because we don't actually think Bitcoin's a currency. It's not really. There's nothing backing it. So if you said one positive with Bitcoin is if you said to me, well, what's its value? I would say, well, its value is whatever you want it to be. But remember, there's nothing actually backing it. So it has no real intrinsic value, but we may want it. We may be prepared to pay for it, but it doesn't have value in that sense. At the other end of the spectrum is banknotes, which are fully backed by the Bank of England, and that is in turn effectively fully backed by the government and by the state effectively. And you can have sort of things in the middle that are backed by things, so it may be backed by financial assets. And the big debate really is, if digital currency is going to take off as money, as opposed to just something that, like Bitcoin, that we might think is sort of something we'd like to have one of, but it's not currency as such. It's not something we use to pay for things. What form is it going to take? And here, the debate goes between something that is backed by sort of so-called safe assets, but isn't fully backed in the way that our notes are, to saying really the only form of digital currency that would fully replicate cash is if the central banks issue it. Now, no central bank has yet taken a decision. We are looking at these questions, and we are looking at the question of, should we create a Bank of England digital currency? We are looking at that, and we'll go on looking at it. It does have huge implications, actually, for the nature of payments in society. But it's a question that will occupy us a lot in the years to come. And it may be, that's where we end up. I'm not ruling it out by any means. We're not anywhere near making I think, like the other central banks, making a decision on it. Mm. My best guess is, though, that I think, in a few years' time, we will be heading towards some sort of digital currency.
Fantastic. Thank you. What wonderful insights for our students today. One of our students has asked, why do you think some parts of society hold a negative view towards the banking and finance sector? And do you think it's important to raise awareness about the roles of banks in everyday life?
Well, I used to be chief executive of the Financial Conduct Authority, and I'm afraid I became all too aware of why people hold negative views of financial institutions. I'm afraid, sadly, that there is. I mean, and particularly if you go back to the financial crisis. There are reasons. I mean, not always. I mean, sometimes it's it's an unfair description of banks and financial institutions, but I'm afraid sometimes it isn't. It is a fair description of their behaviour has not always been what it should be, and that's well documented, unfortunately. I mean, it is important because we can't do without them, as it were. We need various forms of financial institutions in society for society to operate. So we need banks, we need insurance companies, we need asset management to manage our savings. We need all these things. We need people to advise us on our pensions. All of these things are necessary parts of society. And I would say that over time, and I've seen this in my career, that one of the big changes in society that I'm afraid you're going to have to deal with, probably more than we did, is that we are now expecting individuals to take far more financial decisions for themselves than was the case in 30, 40, 50 years ago. Pensions is the best example. When I started work, I didn't have to think really about my pension because the Bank of England provided it for me. In fact, they told me when I was going to retire, which would have been about 15 months ago, actually. All that's gone. More or less. Not quite true at Bank of England. We still do provide pensions, actually, but not in the same way, quite the same way. But for most people in society, you've got to make all those decisions. And therefore, we need advice. We need institutions that will help us all do it. We need all of that. And so it is important that the industry serves society. Now they've got to earn a return. They've got to earn money doing it. That's true. But they do serve society, and they're a critical part of it. And so I'm very frankly committed and keen that we get to a point when frankly the reputation of the industry is better than it has been.
That's great, thank you. Quite an interesting question from Arthur here. Arthur has asked, do you think we should get rid of the penny?
Well, it's funny enough, many things fall to the Bank of England, but that one doesn't actually, in the sense that they don't issue the coins. So it's really a decision for the government, actually. There's very, in my experience, when this issue does come up, there are sort of different views on it. So one view, which Arthur may be getting at, I don't know, is, well, is it really efficient to have these pennies around? And that sort of efficiency argument goes quite a long way until people then say, so you mean that everybody's going to raise the price of everything to get rid of the penny? And at that point, the argument tends to run aground. I mean, I don't. But going back to what we were discussing earlier with the the future of cash, I wouldn't like to predict honestly where that will go to. At the moment, I don't think it will happen. But I'm not, because we don't issue coin, to be honest with you, I'm not close to what the sort of demand for pennies is at the moment, in terms particularly of the sort of new stock, and therefore to what extent it's a declining asset or not.
Fantastic, thank you. One of our students here has asked, how do you see the role of the Bank of England changing in the future? If you see it changing at all.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it's changed a lot in my time. So it's really changed a lot in my time. I think what I'd like to think that we've now got a very clear set of responsibilities for the Bank of England, which, by the way, when I joined the Bank of England, we didn't have that actually. It was very different in that sense. So I think the fact that we now have clear responsibilities in respect of monetary policy and financial stability, which are our two main core purposes, as far as I can see forwards, I would not want to see those change, because I think they are sort of fundamental. We've learned some quite painful lessons to get there in terms of what can go wrong. But I think many things will change. I mean, I think one of the, if I look at, possibly, my time, I've got another, just under 8 years as governor. I think the digital currency issue will be a very big issue. I hope it is, because that means we'll see that COVID will be behind us. Don't want to spend 8 years doing COVID. But I think the digital currency issue is going to be a very big one, because that will change the means of payment. And I think if the Bank of England decides to play a larger role in that area, to be decided, as I say, we haven't got anywhere near that yet. That's quite a big change to the Bank of England.
Fantastic, thank you. One of our students here has asked, what do you think the impact of the introduction of quantitative easing during the pandemic will be on the economy?
Well, I hope for the better. By the way, I mean, this wasn't the first introduction of quantitative easing. I mean, quantitative easing was really something that was introduced during the financial crisis. But as I said earlier, we've used it in much larger amount of stock, and much more aggressively in terms of the flow of it, the scale of purchases. Now, there are a number of reasons for that. One was the degree of market disorder that we were facing in financial markets back in the middle of March. So I've told the story. My first week as governor, Wednesday afternoon, so nearly 3 days gone. And our markets people come into the office and say, we've got to talk. It's never good when that happens. It just doesn't end well. And they said, look, the markets are getting disorderly. And we had to act very quickly. So I think the effect of that, along, by the way, with big actions taken in the US by the Federal Reserve, big actions taken by the European Central Bank and other central banks. I mean, we didn't do this alone. We have achieved a stabilization of markets. But the second reason we did it, which was beginning to emerge at that point, and then became clear to us very soon afterwards, was this lockdown of the economy, and the fact that we had to support it. Now, the other thing I'd say about that is that we are, very near to zero interest rate. I mean, we're at 0.1%, which is the lowest ever. So obviously, you can imagine there's quite a debate in the Bank of England about, well, how many tools have you got left in the bag, as it were, to bring to bear? And that debate's very live, always very live at the moment. But that's another reason why we had to use quantitative easing aggressively, because we don't have, by our own admission, our tools are not as many as they would be in a more normal time.
Fantastic, thank you. A very, very popular question from our students today is, are there any books you would recommend for our audience to read, either if they have an interest in economics, in the economy, or even just something interesting for them to read during their time at home?
Oh gosh. That's a very good question. That's a really hard question, actually. I read actually. I read quite a lot of books, actually, and I don't just read books on economics, actually, because I don't think I wouldn't recommend that as a thing. I think a certain number of economics books is good, but don't only read economics. So I think reading history is a good idea. Pick up a lot of clues. I think reading some philosophy is a good idea. I absolutely shocked our lawyers about last year, actually I was at the time, by telling them, I'm not a lawyer, I don't have any legal training, by telling them I was reading a law book. They were absolutely shocked. They thought this was a very dangerous thing. But actually, I tell you why, actually, it was really over Brexit, actually. I mean, I was sort of fascinated by sort of, the whole sort of constitutional law issue and the whole sort of question about how the constitution really works in this country, which is extremely complicated, it turns out. So I must say, I try to read things which I think will, hopefully I'll sort of, learn from reading them. So, certainly economics, but I wouldn't only read economics by any means.
Fantastic, thank you. I think a lot of our students at the moment are looking for things to read, especially that if they have interest in certain areas whilst they're at home and largely not in school at the moment, of course. So I think quite an interesting question that we ask quite a few of our speakers to reflect on is, if you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Oh, I would, going back to what I was saying earlier, do things that really interest you. Try to choose the things to do that you find interesting and challenging. Don't do something because you think you have to do it. Do what whatever it is, which I'm sure is different for all of us. Because I just reiterate the points I made earlier. I just sort of count myself incredibly lucky that I do something that really interests me. Because otherwise, it would be a lot less enjoyable.
Absolutely. And would you say that the fact that your role and your work has really interested you, seem so passionate about what you do, Andrew, is that the best thing about your job?
I think, well, for me, the best thing about it is that, as I say, it is constantly interesting. I can never really quite predict what's going to come next, and it's constantly challenging. And I've been doing it for 35 years, so I better be interested in it, I guess. But it really is, actually, yeah. And I have great colleagues as well. I mean, the other thing I should say is I'm lucky I work with great colleagues who are also very interesting. So that's, for me, that's the really enjoyable part of it, actually.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And a lot of our students have asked, I think a popular question that often gets put forward to speakers is, do you think your job is fun?
How gosh, diplomatically. I enjoy it. I do enjoy it. Some parts of it are really fun, and some parts of it are, pretty hard, frankly, actually. I mean, they are hard, but that's life. I mean, that's, I absolutely accept that with the sort of, so swings and roundabouts. And then there are really fun bits, actually. Yeah, there are some fun bits. Yeah.
Fantastic. And finally, one of our students here has asked, what is it that you hope to achieve in your term as Governor of the Bank of England?
Well, get us out of COVID, I think. Honestly, if you'd asked me this question sort of, pretty much as Parliament did, actually, I don't know, about a month before I became governor, I gave one set of answers. By the time as I was saying, by the time I'd actually taken the job up, it was completely different. We're gone. You still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Oh, right, we've gone over to the screen. So, I mean, at the moment, I think, restoring the economy to, a state of normality. It may be somewhat different from the one we had before COVID. I don't think everything will be exactly as it was before. But I think getting the economy and therefore society back to a degree of normality, an acceptable degree of normality, is a huge task on our hands, as we're all experiencing. Bank of England can't solve it all on its own. I hasten to say, but I think we can contribute importantly, and we will do that.
Fantastic, that's wonderful. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. A huge thank you for making the time to join us today, Andrew, for what I think will have been a very busy day. Just a quick announcement for our students. We have shared a feedback form in the Q&A thread, and sincere apologies if we didn't get to put your question to the Governor. We did have over 200 questions submitted from our audience today, so we were never going to get the chance to get through them all, but we will share them with the bank's team so that they can see what's at the forefront of your mind and the questions you have as well. Andrew, thank you so much for your time, and we hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you very much. Yes, best wishes and have a very good day.